He's just one of 16 officials under investigation. We've obtained 2 secret internal reports about the investigations division. Its former director said it had acted professionally and objectively despite a lack of resources to deal with 3,000 cases. Nevertheless, they're damning. It's described as a
combat zone,
where the
management is dysfunctional,
plagued by
ongoing conflict
between senior officials and in need of
major change and reform,
where staff have feared that the integrity of the organisation could be
usurped by political forces or events.
In New York, I met the woman who has been struggling to reform it. No operational strategy, no clear goals, no standard procedures for investigators, dysfunctional management, unaccountable decision-making, distrust, internal conflict, constant disagreements over what investigators can and cannot do. Does that not suggest an organisation in total disarray?
It tells that the investigation division has had very serious problems.
The report makes clear that in the past cases were not properly investigated, if at all.
I don't know exactly because it was before my time, but I would certainly admit that we did not investigate deeply enough. And you know, the Bahel case, as you raised yourself, is an example of that.
How can we expect effective investigation from oversight when these sort of internal squabbles are going on?
These are the issues I have been dealing with, and these management problems are now solved.
They're solved?
Yes.
Is that because those who were causing these problems no longer work?
Yes. New policy, new people.
Brave words in New York. What effect will they have on the ground? The allegations about golden guns were one of the first tests of the new regime. Early signs weren't good. When the investigators and their military police arrived to secure evidence, the peacekeepers prevented them from doing so. Incredibly, they confined the military police behind barbed wire. According to documents seen by Panorama, this is the Catholic mission the investigators were staying in when 2 armoured vehicles turned up with Pakistani peacekeepers. They felt threatened and so decided to leave. The UN found 5 peacekeepers had obstructed the investigators. The Pakistani army says they didn't, but disciplined 3 officers for lack of tact. Despite the setback, the investigators produced a report in July 2007. It concludes that Pakistani peacekeepers did help the illegal gold traders here in Mombwalu, but it only goes on to recommend that 1 Pakistani officer be reprimanded for his role.
The UN openly condemned that. Anybody who was involved in the trafficking or smuggling of a country's natural resources, where we're supposed to be there to work to preserve the peace, is clearly unacceptable to the United Nations and certainly breaks our code of conduct.
The Pakistani army told Panorama there was no evidence their peacekeepers were involved. But what does the report say about the rearming of the militia? It goes on to conclude that investigators could not substantiate the allegation that peacekeepers had supplied weapons to the militia. In 2006, the FNI rebel group leaders Dragon and Kung Fu were arrested. They are now held without trial in a high-security prison in the capital of Congo, Kinshasa. When they were questioned by UN investigators, they denied getting weapons from the Pakistanis, but they later issued a statement admitting they had. I went to visit them in prison and asked if what they now say about getting weapons was true.
Yes, it's true. They did give us arms. Why would I lie? What for? The arms they gave us, we used them for security.
It's my understanding that you yourself were the liaison between Pakistan peacekeepers and your troops, that you collected the weapons and distributed it to your troops as well as ammunition. Is that true?
They gave me the weapons, then I distributed them. There were 2 of us that received weapons.
Whatever the truth of Dragon and Kung Fu's allegation, the fact is that the UN's Oversight Service appears to have ignored crucial evidence of wrongdoing.
How serious do you take those allegations?
Any effort to rearm militias would be of great concern to us. After all, we're not here to... We've lost lives in fighting these militias. Let's not forget that.
I've spoken to the militia leaders. They say the arms they received were the same arms they demobilised with. What do you say about that?
You know, militia leaders are militia leaders. I mean, they always have their interest, if you will. All I can say is that this investigation didn't confirm that.
The Pakistani army strongly denies the allegation, but UN insiders we've spoken to believe that key evidence, including the admissions of the militia leaders, was ignored, and they're not the only ones.
When the information came out publicly that these individuals indeed admitted to having traded gold and having traded weapons with the Pakistani peacekeepers, if I had been the UN Investigation Division, I would have been in to see them the following day. UN peacekeepers are there to keep the peace. When they are involved in rearming militias or trading with them, they do nothing to help the peace.
The men were not re-interviewed, and there's more evidence that the investigation was less than thorough. Panorama has obtained evidence given to the UN investigators by a senior officer in the Congolese army. He said a commander in a town near Mongboalu was also trading gold and secretly giving arms back to the militia. These allegations, again denied by the Pakistanis, are not in the UN report.
Now, why is that not referred to in the report?
If you have new information, I would suggest that you transmit it to us, and we may reopen the case for new investigation.
Keeping the UN on its mission is fiendishly politically and culturally sensitive. Many of the richer countries are reluctant to send troops. And without the buy-in of those that do, the UN couldn't operate. No wonder things move slowly.
They desperately need troop-contributing countries to come forward. Pakistan, for example, contributes 10,000 troops to the peacekeeping missions around the world. They're vitally important to UN peacekeeping. When these kind of allegations come up, they're uncomfortable, and it's very difficult for the UN to insist on investigations. Troop-contributing countries hold the UN over a barrel.
There's no suggestion that Pakistani peacekeepers, for example, behave any worse than others. It's just that there are more of them. Last year, Pakistan earned $126 million for supplying troops.
We've been told by people who know about the investigation,
Yes.
that they believe the investigation was a whitewash and it was carried out for political reasons, not to upset the Pakistani army. What do you say to that?
Well, I refute it in the most strongest terms.
You don't believe there's been a whitewash?
Certainly not.
So the
Certainly not.
The Pakistani army says it has no means to influence UN investigations.
The UN is essentially a political organisation which is run by its member states, and therefore everything it does is subject to the politics of the interplay of member states. And for as long as that continues, for as long as it doesn't have an independent, for instance, oversight organisation capable of taking independent action, whatever the political consequences could be in those member states, that's inevitably going to be a criticism that will be levelled at it, and a justified one too.
There will be a need for the UN so long as there is war. And as its latest mission in Darfur shows, there's little chance of it running out of work. Calls for reform are nothing new, but it's clear that one of its most vital missions is to examine itself.
If we didn't have the UN, we'd have to invent it. It is a vital organisation. The real problem does not, in my view, lie with the UN. The real problem lies in the political will of the member states. They're the people who should really bear the responsibility of this, and above all, the richer member states, who have failed to provide it with the resources it needs.